Hey guys, it's Coach Reba here. I am just getting you started on your first flipped classroom video. So you are going to need your math journal out. We are going to look at how to set up these pages when you're at home watching these videos on your own. So first things first, we are going to look at how my page is set up. Now on the screen, you'll see that I just took a still shot of what my notes page looks like. And the only thing it's missing is down here at the bottom in this area. You'll notice there's empty space for our examples because we're going to go ahead and do those on another page so that you can add those in down there. But everything else on this page should look exactly like my page. Obviously, your handwriting and things like that aren't going to look alike, but you should have everything written down that I have written down. So at the top up here, you're going to notice how we set this up is we have done Cornell notes. Now, I know some of you have heard of Cornell notes in your elementary schools. Some of you, this might be new to you. If you're new to Cornell notes, that's fine. All it means is we are setting up this T-looking thing, and there's already a red line right down here on this side. So all you're doing really is going darker over that line. So now that we have this T, we're going to put our title. My title up here is written, so you're just going to write that title. It is Lesson 1-1, Compare and Order Whole Numbers and Decimals. Now, I like to abbreviate a lot, so like this hashtag, as you guys would call it, that's also my number sign. So if you see an abbreviation like that, it's just whole numbers and decimals. And then over here in this top left part, I have the page number, page 2. So make sure you're numbering your pages, and then you're going to go later on and you're going to go put this in your table of contents in the front. So you're going to say page 2, lesson 1-1. Okay. Then the next thing down here underneath, you'll see this L.T over here. I'm going to do this in a different color. My L.T over here, that I wrote underneath there, if you can read it, it says learning target. I'm not always going to write out learning target. I'm going to abbreviate it just to save us some time. But our learning target is our goal. Like, what do we have to know by the end of this math lesson? So sometimes there's 1, 2, 3. This time there are 2. So our first goal over here is we are going to use inequalities to compare decimals. And like if you ever can't read a word, like how this decimal is kind of weird over here, sometimes the pictures don't take very well, just listen to what I'm saying. If you're watching the video, you can pause and go back and say, oh, what was that word? I can't even read that. So just go back. Number 2 says order a set of decimals. So we're going to do a couple of different things when we're looking at like a set of numbers. On the left-hand side, that's usually like what we're talking about over here on the right side. So then my next one right here, it says inequalities on the left side, which means that over here on the right side, my chunk of notes, that is what my inequalities are. So it's my less than and greater than sign. You guys should recognize those from 5th grade. So you're going to go ahead and put those over there. Now, as I'm going through these, I know I might be going fast for how you are writing right now. That is the beauty of these videos. If you guys are watching these at home and you're like, whoa, Ms. Reba is going so fast, press pause, finish what I've already talked about, get caught up with the video, and then press play again. You don't just want to be copying stuff down and I'm 3 steps down, because then you're not really understanding the lesson. And then tomorrow when you come back to do the homework, you're not going to really understand. So pause it if you're behind, then press play when you're caught up. No big deal. So now over here I'm on to place values. Our place values are just the place that the number holds. So this number that I have right here is 256.089. Another way to say that is 256 and 89 thousandths. And I say thousandths because that's the last place there is the thousandths place. That 9 is in the thousandths, so that makes that 89 thousandths. So you can say it either way, but then also you want to make sure that you write what each one is. My hundreds, my tens, my ones, my tenths, my hundredths, and my thousandths. make sure we label all those because that's going to be really important when we go to order numbers that have decimals, okay? Our last thing that we're going to do before we go to some examples over here is we're going to go through the steps. Now you'll notice when I do the examples with you in a second, I'm going to go through these exact 3 steps over and over and over again. Sometimes when we get problems in front of us, people want to skip the steps and they want to just say, oh, this one's bigger, this one's smaller, and then they make mistakes. So make sure you are writing these steps down and that every time you know all 3 steps. Number 1, line up numbers vertically, and we're going to line them up by the decimal. Number 2, we're going to add zeros as a placeholder, and I'll show you exactly what that means if you don't understand what that means right now. And then number 3, start on the left, so we're going to work left to right to compare the numbers. So pause the video right now if you are not caught up with me and get those written out, and then press play when you are ready to do some examples, because I'm going to do a couple of examples on my next page where you won't see these notes anymore. First page in this empty space at the bottom. Now at this point I have a couple of more examples to do, so if you have ran out of space, you can go on to the next page and number at page number 3. If you still have space down here at the bottom, if you still have space after writing that example that we just did, that's fine. Keep adding it in the bottom. If not, go ahead and number your next page number, whether it's 2 or 3 or whatever it is. And I'm going to add another example. Okay. Our next example here is going to be one with decimals. And then we'll use one with our less than greater than sign. We'll see if we can fit these all on one page. Okay, so my next one, we are using the number 1.58. We're going to use 0.9. And then we're going to use 1.444. 3 numbers again, and we have to put them in order from, let's say we're going again from least to greatest. So let's look back at our steps. Our steps say our first step, look at it, try and think of it without having to look back, is we have to align them vertically. So I'm going to take my numbers and I'm going to write them up and down. So since I'm just going to bring these over here this time and write them under. Line them up by the decimal. Make sure you're lining them up by the decimal. So my next one is 0.9. And then we have 1.58. So all my numbers are lined up. Notice if I were to do this kind of a little more sloppy, it might be hard to see which number I'm looking at. So make sure that you're writing your numbers directly under each other. Otherwise, you're going to have problems later. Now that I have my 3 numbers, step number 2. We didn't have to do this last time, but I have empty spaces in here right now. So right here, I have an empty space. And then I have 2 empty spaces right there. And then I have an empty space right there. So I have to fill all of those empty spaces with zeros. So I'm going to go ahead and fill 0, 0, 0. And my last 0. Now that I've filled them, I can go ahead and we start on the left. We're going to go left to right and we're going to order them from least to greatest. So our first row, let's use a different color. Our first row here that we're looking at is our ones place. So we have a 1, and a 0. Right off the bat, these 2 are bigger. My 0 is smaller, so I can go ahead and I'm going to write 0.9 is my least one. Remember, that was my original number, 0.9. Then we can move on to our next row. Now we're done with that row. Circle this over here. We're looking at a 4. Oops, we're done with that row. We did that. We're looking at our 4 and a 5. So we know 4 is smaller than 5. So that means my next smallest has to be 1.444. And then that leaves my 1.58 is my biggest number out of all 3 of those. Notice sometimes a mistake people make when they look at our original problem up here is they say, oh, this 1.444, that has 4 numbers in it, so it's going to be the biggest. But no, that is a mistake that a lot of people make. You can't just look at it and say, oh, this one's the longest, it has to be the biggest. That's not the case. That's why we line them up by our decimals and then work our way down. Last step is we always box our answers in math, so that way we know that's the answer. Okay, one more example. Stick with me. We got one more example here, and then we should be ready to go. Our last example is using a greater than, less than. So we're going to have only 2 numbers this time because that's the only way to do greater than and less than. So the 2 numbers that we are going to do is we're going to do, let's write these in black, we're going to do 11.3, and let's do 11.33. Now again, don't get tricked by our this one has 4 digits type thing. We can't just look at them. We have to follow our steps. So I'm going to write them up and down first. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this one down here and write it underneath, and I'm lining up the decimal. So I have a 3 and a 3. Looking back at our steps, number 2 said fill any spaces with a 0, and I have this weird space right here. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that with my 0. So now we have 11.30 and 11.33, or 11 and 30 hundredths, or 11 and 33 hundredths, because those are the place value. Now from left to right, we're going to go ahead and look at our numbers here and see if we can eliminate which one is bigger, which one's smaller. 1 and 1, that does not help us out because they're the same. Then we're looking at the next one over. 1 and 1, again, that does not help us. Moving right along. 3 and 3, again, they're the same number. That's a 0 help. Okay, now we're in our last column where we filled in our 0. So we have a 0 and a 3. So we know that 3 is bigger than 0. So that number has to be bigger. So if I'm going to write, let's rewrite these down here. I have 11.3 and we had 11.33. I need to put in my inequality sign. Which one is bigger? And remember, our open side faces the one that was bigger, and we said that this one, 11.33, was our larger number. So when I go ahead and write that, open side goes to the bigger number. So we read this, 11.3 is less than 11.33, or 11 and 33 hundredths. Then our last step, we always box our answers with all of our lovely work shown. Awesome. I hope you guys liked your first video. Make sure that you're writing everything and boxing your answers, and this will be such a good tool for you. So listen to Miss Reba now, or Mr. Gaines. Okay, now I have a blank page. We're going to go through some examples. We're going to use those 3 steps that we wrote out, so make sure you're looking back at those if you are stuck. Okay, our first example here. We are given the numbers. Oops, I did not write right. We gotta erase. We're going to write the numbers 35,000. Yikes, this is not working right now. 35,000. We have 35,113. And then we have 35,000, and that looks like decimal. I'm gonna make that a comment. 35,102. So first step, I need to write them vertically. So I'm gonna bring these two, and I'm just gonna bring them down so I don't have to rewrite all of them. So I'm gonna rewrite them underneath. So I'm gonna put my 35,113. Notice these numbers don't have decimals, but we know that the decimal goes after the ones place. So really, they do have decimals. They just don't show because we don't have any numbers after the decimal. So I'm just showing you that we're lining them up by the decimal, even though there wasn't. We know where it is. So I line them up. My step 2 is I have to fill any blank areas, so any placeholders. This one, I have numbers in the whole thing, so I don't have any filling to do. There's no blank spaces. So now I skip to number 3. I start on the left-hand side and I work my way over. What that means is I'm comparing this row of numbers first, my 3s over here. So I'm going to say, okay, this is a 3, a 3, and a 3. So that's even. As of right now, we're even. So now we go one step over, moving our way from left to right. Again, I have 5, 5, and 5. So we're all even. Now, here's where I can start putting them in order. And we're going to do least to greatest. So I have a 0, a 1, and a 1 right here in my next column. This is my first area to actually compare them. 0, we know, is the smallest one. So now I know that my smallest number, when I go and put them in order, has to be 35,000. That's my smallest because it had this 0 right here. So now I'm done with this number because it was my smallest. And these two both have 1, so that doesn't help me anymore. So I'm going to cross that out because my 1s are the same. They're equal. So now we're moving over to my next column. So I'm looking at this 1 and this 0. And look, we didn't even have to go over to the last, to our 1s place, because right here my 0 is going to be smaller. This 0 is smaller than this 1. So that makes this one is my next smallest number. So now I have 35,102. So that eliminates that one. And then my last one is going to be 35,000. Whoops. This keeps moving on me. 35,113 is our biggest one. Then another strategy that we always use in 6th grade math is when we have our final answer, we always put a big box around it. So that way it's easy to see what our final answer was. And there we go. We followed the 3 steps for that example. So make sure that this example is back